Good morning, Governor. Thanks so much for being with us since you took office in 2010.
Thanks, Deirdre.
Pretty impressive record. You've added more than 67,000 new jobs. Most of the jobs are entrepreneurial, high tech, so basically from the private sector. What measures specifically have worked the best in Virginia to create jobs?
Well, thanks for having me on, Deirdre. I think it's a couple things. One, we try to get our fiscal house in order in this state so businesses would have confidence in locating and growing in Virginia. We cut spending back to 2006 levels and ended up with a budget surplus. That was after a $4 billion deficit. We closed the fiscal year again today and have another couple $100 million surplus as well. And then we focused on the job-creating mechanisms. We made some tax and regulatory reforms to improve the business climate. We opened up trade offices abroad. We traveled extensively to ask for business. And we just had a positive attitude about entrepreneurs in Virginia. And I think all that has worked.
Governor, with the tax reforms, what specifically have you had to do? Do you just not make corporations pay a lot of money if they want to start up their business in Virginia?
Well, actually, a bill like that passed this year to give local governments the ability to waive the business license tax that is an impediment to entrepreneurs starting and small businesses growing. But we've had things like an angel investor tax credit, a biotech tax credit, and certain targeted tax credits to focus on certain industries that we think Virginia is good at: biotech, nanotech, aerospace, and some things like that to bolster those industries. But it was more the broader economic climate that we try to increase and improve. We created a lot more money for the Governor's Opportunity Fund to allow us to recruit companies like Northrop Grumman from California to Virginia. They're coming this year. So it's a host of things, but it all has to do, I think, with the basic economic climate: low taxes, regulation, litigation, good right-to-work laws. And then we put a lot of money into our higher education
Governor,
universities in the STEM area, and that's been helpful.
Before we took this quick break,
sure, Deirdre,
we were talking about the state spending levels. You've cut them to 2006 levels, and this year you started with a deficit, which is a huge national problem. You're actually finishing the fiscal year today with a surplus, $400 million. How specifically have you done this? Well,
last year was a $400 million surplus last June. This year we expect it to be a couple $100 million, but until we close out the year, we won't know. Deirdre, I think it started with just explaining to our citizens that we were in tough budget times. We couldn't raise taxes. That would be devastating to the economy, and we needed to have shared sacrifice. So we made cuts in a lot of areas, including education, health care. We reformed government. We put a hiring freeze in place and pared back to 2006 levels. Now, sure, I took a little bit of grief and there was some pain.
I was just going to say, Governor, to cut education and health care, that couldn't have been popular.
No, it wasn't. But I explained to people, look, we're going to spend your money smarter. We're going to set priorities. And in the long run, this is going to work out fine. And, of course, it did. And I tell you what, our good public servants in Virginia found ways to be more entrepreneurial with the money we gave them. And everybody sacrificed a little bit. That's the same thing we do at the national level. When you got $1.5 trillion in deficit a year, you've got to make those tough calls, but down the road, it's going to lead to a better country.
Do you worry, though, about the consequences? I'm just going to pick education. That was one of the things you mentioned. I mean, if you stop hiring teachers, then what happens to the state education level? What happens to the economy later down the road?
Well, that doesn't happen. The problem is, Deirdre, both at the state and the federal level, we have overspent. In Virginia, we spent 28% faster than the rate of growth of population and inflation over a decade. We had about a 7% increase, I think, in student enrollment over that period of time, and but we raised education spending about 50%. So we were spending more than we should have to start with, and so paring back just meant we had to tighten the belt a little bit, and it was the right thing to do. And sure, after short-term pain, we had long-term gain. We were ranked the most business-friendly state in America yesterday by CNBC, and we're one of the few states with surpluses. So it's working.
You also passed 2 aggressive economic development packages. You alluded to this before as well. You haven't raised taxes. Again, just the nuts and bolts. People are probably very curious about how you're doing this, and does the math stand up?
Well, sure. I mean, my predecessor left me with a $2 billion tax increase, income tax increase, as part of the budget balancing proposal. We cut that out, worked with Democrats and Republicans. I got a split legislature and found ways to set priorities. And that's what needs to be done, I believe, at the federal level. And you give business confidence if you run your state like a business. You can't borrow. You can't kick the can down the road. You can't deficit spend in the states. You've got to balance your budget. And we did it with spending cuts, and it worked.
Governor, congratulations. Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell.
Thanks, Deirdre.